Right. So we are reading Robert Monroe's The Far Journey. We are on Appendices, page number 265 of the book and 138 of the PDF.
Appendices 1. The outer body experienced most frequently asked questions and answers. Question. How do you know it isn't just a type of dreaming? Most individuals do dismiss the experience when they encounter it as nothing more than a vivid dream. At most, it may be categorized by some as what is identified as a lucid dream. In the latter, the dreamer is apparently aware that he is dreaming and can control the content of his dream, even to the point of changing the event, the participants, and the outcome.
So there are various kinds of dream. Okay. One kind of dream is you're dreaming and you don't know that you're dreaming. One is that you're dreaming, but you don't have any control in the dream. And there is another kind of dream in which you know that you're dreaming and you have control in the dream. That is what is called a lucid dream. Liuji had given 2 talks to us on lucid dreaming. Number 1, he gave 1 talk on lucid dreaming, and then he gave another talk of a comparison between OBEs and lucid dreaming along with Alan, right? So all of you understand this, that when I'm doing a lucid dream, in the dream, I can control the event. I can make decisions and I can direct the way that the dream is going. So many people, even if they experience an OBE, they feel that it is a lucid dream. Now, having said that, one of the ways to go into an OBE can also be through a lucid dream.
In the OOBE, the individual is near totally conscious, as our civilization defines the state. Most, if not all, of your physical sensory perception is replicated. You can see, hear, and touch. The weakest seems to be smell and taste. Your perspective is from a position outside your physical body, near or distant. In a near state, it is usually from a location impossible for you to be with your physical body, such as floating against the ceiling. In a far location, it could be in Paris when you know you are in New York physically. You can observe events taking place, but you cannot change or significantly affect them. You can verify the authenticity of such events subsequently if you so desire. You cannot participate to any major degree in this physical activity because you are not physical. It is the extreme reality of the OBE that sets it apart from a dream. It is as real as any physical life experience.
So when you have an OOEB, all your sensory perceptions are active, although the sense of taste and smell is a little inactive. Okay, it's a little toned down. Now, you can find yourself in another locale. So where your physical body is, you may land up anywhere in the universe. Okay, over here, he's given the example of Paris, but technically you could even be in Mars or the moon in an OOEB state, right? Plus, you cannot really participate in the event, although people who are very sensitive can sense your presence. So it was like that movie, The Ghost, right? Whoopi Goldberg could actually sense the presence of those entities, of the spirits. So you could be in an OEB state and someone who has that perception can actually perceive you. We were having a discussion yesterday at one of the Monroe Institute conferences of the Leadership Council, etc. And one of the things, one person raised this issue, and it always comes up in all discussions, the ethics of an OOEB. That today, when you're in an OOEB state, you can actually invade the privacy of another person in that state of consciousness. Now, you are not going to be able to really interact over there unless the other person is extremely sensitive and aware. Okay. But you can observe everything. So the lady was saying that I would feel very, very, it's a very big problem that if a person comes into my bedroom, right? Now, that is something that when we are going into these states of consciousness, the ethics that we need to follow for ourselves, that needs to be very, very structured. So over here, what he's saying is that you can be in a different locale. You can observe all activity, but you cannot really participate or affect them in a profound way, although you can verify that event if it actually happened later on. Okay. In Robert Monroe's first book, when he started having these OEBs, he mentions various incidents where he actually, excuse me, he actually went to visit, he went to his friend's house. And later on, when he described everything that was happening in his friend's house, it actually turned out to be correct. The other thing is that in many programs in the institute, you can have a shared OOB also. I think it will come later on, but you can have a shared OOEB where one person is in another location. Say one person is New York and the other person is in New Delhi. Now, both of you decide I'm going to have an OOEB and we are going to meet over there. And you set an intent to do that, right, at a particular time. Now, that person in New York writes his experience down. You in Delhi will write your experience down, and then you exchange the experiences. So many times people have shared experiences in this OEB state also, right? So you can interact over there, but maybe you cannot affect what is happening.
OOBE. Question: can anyone go out of body? Several studies made during the past 10 years indicate that some 25% of adult humans remember having at least one spontaneous OOBE. Many were unaware of what had happened to them until the phenomenon was described to them. As stated earlier, we take the position that everyone goes into the OOBE state during the delta or deep sleep state as a natural process and in varying degrees. Therefore, one step may be to begin to remember the OOB patterns you have or are performing each night when you sleep. Further, after specific psychological and or philosophic preparation, we believe that anyone can indeed consciously move into OOB states.
So all of us, when we are going into delta sleep, are going out of the body. This is something which is given, right? And Robert Monroe actually experienced many people who were in that sleep state were going into that school over there. And he mentions it in this book, right? Having said that, we are not consciously aware that we are having an OOEB, right? Now, what also happens is that if you have knowledge about something, then you have an experience, then that experience becomes real for you because you have the knowledge. So we keep talking about it in awareness that there are two wheels which are there. One is the knowledge, the other is the experience. So knowledge without experience is khokla, it's hollow, right? Because if you know something but you've not experienced it, then you're never going to understand what it is. The other aspect is that you've had an experience, but you don't know what the experience is. Again, you are khokla because you really don't know what it is. So over here, what he's saying is very clear that 25% of the people have an OOBE, but they are not aware that they have had an OOEB because they don't have knowledge and information about this aspect of consciousness.
Question: will deliberately going OOB hurt you? Could you die from it? After 25 years of investigation as well as personal exploration, there is no evidence to support either possibility. There is no doubt as to the emotional impact upon discovery of the reality of the OOB state. The major adjustment of one's belief systems is often traumatic and must be dealt with carefully. Physiologically, there seems to be no effect, including any depletion of energy.
So, whenever we experience something, that experience is bound to create shifts in our systems, right? Emotionally, mentally, physically, as well as spiritually, in all the aspects. But when we experience this experience, the emotional shift is pretty profound. We have changes of people going into, and this happens when a person has a near death experience also. So there's a list of things which happen to a person when they go through a NDE, right? The personality can take a shift. So likewise, when a person has an out of body experience, their belief system definitely takes a shift because they realize that they can exist without the physical body. And that is a tremendous emotional shift that you really start taking. Your fear of death will start to come down. And that is one of the primordial fears that all of us carry in our backs, like a big rock in a backpack, right? So lots of emotional shifts can actually take place when you have an out of body experience. But we have not experienced anyone really dying from having an out of body experience. And naturally, people are doing it all the time. Even in the excursion workshops, in the 2-day workshops, so many people have had out of body experiences. And there are many people in the awareness group who regularly have out of body experiences. I mean, they used to have out of body experiences when we used to have the physical meditations here. Many people, even in the regular, that one meditation, people used to have out of body experiences. And we've not lost anyone till now. So I don't think there is anything to fear.
Question: do drugs or alcohol help or bring on an OOBE? There is some data to indicate that hallucinogens may be producing an uncontrolled OOBE. The drug experience in and of itself has not been studied in depth as to this possibility. Alcohol as a depressant tends to inhibit a conscious OOBE, or at least the memory thereof. There is some support to the concept that anesthetics are no more than chemical triggers to produce deep OOB states. Example, unconsciousness. Experimental slow administration of these under non-threatening conditions, as well as the medical description of the various planes of anesthesia, are the basis for this premise.
So when a person is drunk, what do we say? That the person is incoherent, right? The person is not coherent. So alcohol, and this is what my personal experience is also, that alcohol tends to shut off certain perceptive senses which are there, and and actually it kills. I mean, there's research on this. I've not really studied it, but they say that alcohol actually starts to kill your brain cells, right? So when the killing of the brain cells take place, there's a stunning which takes place. So you get out of something that, when you're stuck with something or you want to step out of a particular scenario, you want to stop thinking of something, then alcohol can help you to get out of that situation. But the fact of the matter is that it is inhibiting your sensory perception and your ability, your cortical function also. So whenever we are going into these altered states using the Monroe process, we are totally in control. We know what is happening. Our brainwave patterns are of heightened awareness, not of dulled awareness. Whereas alcohol dulls our awareness. Now, yes, there are certain drugs which can take us into these altered states of consciousness also. Like we had a talk on ayahuasca, and there's peyote, there's some people have mushrooms. They can also take you to an altered state. But a drug induced altered state is not as stable as an altered state which you can go into at will, which is what happens in the Monroe workshops. You can go into those states at will, right? Like that. When you get the encoding, you can actually access those states, you understand those states, and your cognitive functions are available in those states of consciousness. So your awareness is actually heightened, it is not dulled. But when you take alcohol or any other drugs, the sensory perceptions can get dulled, or it becomes so heightened that it is not easy to access them without the drug itself, right? Now, anesthesia, there has been a tremendous increase in the number of people having near death experiences. This is simply because of the rejuvenation process. Like, you have those paddles and you shock the heart into working again, etc., which causes these NDEs. Now, one of the ways in which a person, when you're going into anesthesia, it can actually trigger an out of body experience. But the anesthesia is not what will always take you into an OBE experience. So there are many people who go on the table, on the operating table, and they say that we are actually observing ourselves being operated on. But again, that's not the norm and not the rule, but many people do experience it.
Question. Is the OOBE similar to the near death experiences that have been written about in several recent books? It is very similar, more pointedly with allowances for cultural connotations and uncontrolled action reaction due to high stress ambience of the moment. They appear to be one and the same. Most, if not all, of the elements found in the near death reports have been replicated repeatedly with various laboratory subjects using the hemisync process. The difference lies in the perception of the events and situations encountered. Without anxiety and stress, armed with objective observation, another perspective of the same state condition is forthcoming.
So when a person has a near death experience, it is generally in a traumatic situation that an NDE occurs. You've had an accident, or you are having an operation, or someone has beaten you up, or you have collapsed. Okay, you've had a heart attack, you're having a brain stroke. So some kind of a trauma normally happens when you have a near death experience. That is a general thumb rule in 90-95% of the cases, I would say. But an O but an OBE is something which happens when you're more relaxed, when you're going into the vibrational state, when you're actually consciously disconnecting. So there's a very big difference in the experience that a person who has had the way that an NDE occurs and the way an out of body experience occurs. Having said that, in both the cases, as I've already mentioned, a lot of physiological, emotional, and other changes take place, behavioral changes take place, and they are very similar in both the cases. So having an awareness that we can exist without the physical body actually can create a lot of shifts in our consciousness.
Question. Are such things as weather conditions, moon phase, lying north-south important in achieving the OOBE? We have no hard data to support the premise that any of these have a significant effect on the OOBE. There are a few indicators that lying in the north-south position does have some effect, which would infer that the Earth's magnetic field may have some bearing on the process. Because it was easily done, the new isolation booth in our laboratory is aligned in a magnetic north-south position. By setting up artificial magnetic fields within the booth, we will be able to equalize or produce a null magnetically, much as the astronauts experienced in their moon exploration. Subsequent studies, therefore, should provide partial answers at least.
Okay. So now, what works for you, works for you. Okay, this is something that I need to express over here, that if you can go into an altered state of consciousness when the moon is going towards full moon, very good. If it is going towards new moon and it works for you, very good. If you are facing in a particular direction and it works for you, extremely good. Okay, now, having said all that, from the Vastu programs that we are conducting, and when we see the axis system of the body, we have seen that lying in a particular way aligns the axes of the body. So in when that happens, it reduces the stress in the body system. Now, if we are wanting to have an OOB, then the body needs to be in a relaxed state. If it is stressed, then at times it may become difficult to have an OBE, right? So lying aligned with the axis of the earth may be a good thing for us to do. Now, provided we want to practice that, then we need to practice it. Okay. These things are very, very hard to document. So it's all very, very subjective, right? Something may work at some time, something may work at some other time. Today you're lying in your bed and suddenly there's a lightning strike and you get a shock, which creates a shiver in your body system and just throws you out of your body. So it could happen to anyone, right? An earthquake may trigger a OBE. So there are so many factors which can trigger an OBE, but it is not confirmed because there is no hard data. It's very difficult to put this into empirical, studies.
If I leave my body temporarily, can't someone else get in it while I'm gone? If our premise is correct, there is no more possibility of this taking place than there would be during normal sleep. If there could be statistics worked up on such possibility, the odds against an occurrence of this sort are far greater than those of your being killed in an auto accident during the coming year. Over the past 15 years, working with laboratory subjects and program participants, there have been no incidents that remotely could be construed as possession or something destructive or uncontrollable.
So now, whenever we are using the Monroe process, we are very clearly in the affirmation saying that we only want to meet those entities who who have greater knowledge than us or have equal knowledge to us, and we want to only experience those things which are beneficial and constructive to us. Now, this is an intent we are setting before we go into an out of body experience, right? So we are automatically creating a protection kavach. We are creating a protection when we are going into these experiences with the Monroe process. The other thing is that when we are using the preparatory process, it is actually enhancing our energy levels, our awareness levels, and our ability to experience what we really want to experience. So we are creating a protection, right? Now, when I look at it from the shamanic point of view, when I did the 3-year Foundation for Shamanic Studies program, in that there is one thing which they talk about, which is partial possession, right? All of us are not 100% one person. So there is something called multiple personality syndrome, where many people exist in the same body system. Now, whichever conscious awareness is in control of the body, that is the personality which is going to be expressed outwardly, right? So now, in that case, what happens is that if there is a person who is diabetic, the one of the personalities is diabetic, and they've done studies on this also, and that person is in control of the body, then if you test the blood, it is diabetic. Now, another one of the personalities take over the body And that personality is not diabetic. If you test the blood, it will not be, sugar will not be there in the blood. So these things happen. Okay. Having said that, I have not experienced anyone having an OOB and someone else taking possession of the body without permission. Okay. Now, when we were reading about the explorers, the entities like Arso, okay, Arso was using the body system of Rosie McKnight to speak and say things, right? So that control is given by allowing the other entity to take control. However, when you're having an OOB, you're putting yourself into that state of consciousness that it's not easy for another entity to get it. We have not experienced this, at least I have not experienced this happening ever in all the programs that we have done.
Question. In your previous book, you gave an angle method for getting out of your body, but I can't make it work for me. Is there something I'm not doing right? The method described was a very early technique that worked at that time. We have since discovered the many other vital factors that are involved in the process. Also, we currently use other techniques that are easier to understand and perform. Briefly put, it is not quite as simple as envisioned earlier.
Okay. So we are going to have, I'm going to create a program of an out-of-body experience program. Okay. Now, of course, that is not going to guarantee anyone having an out-of-body experience. But yeah, we will go through a lot of techniques which are there for attempting to get out of the body. There are many ways. And if something works for you, it simply works for you. So we are setting up the program. I guess we will be, I'll be setting it up with Gargi when we'll have the program, most probably first week of May, we will attempt to get that program out. So you can experience various techniques, and basically all the tracks and the discussions that we are going to use for that program have been done by a gentleman called William Bullman. He's written 4 or 5 books on the out of body experience. So we are going to take up Liquid Luck as the next book. And then after that, maybe we'll take up Bill's book, so that people who have experienced the workshop can get a deeper understanding of what we are talking about. But we'll see. So there are many ways of getting out of the body. This angle method was one of the ways.
Question. What does it mean when you get strange aches and pains in your head and various parts of your body when you try to go OOB? Generally, it infers unconscious anxieties and concerns that must be sought out and addressed before you can go on to the OOB state. If you are able to get behind or perceive the reason for each one at the level they exist, then release the emotion attached. These physical signals will disappear.
So as a rule, whenever we are doing any of these meditations, if you have jerks, if you have aches and pains, it shows that there is some kind of a block in your body system at that point, right? Now, there's a book called Body Hold Score. What that implies is that whatever happens to you, any traumatic experience that happens to you is stuck in your body. So whenever we are going into altered states, a lot of clearing starts to take place. And when the clearing takes place, that thing which is stuck, when it comes out, because it is associated with a pain or a trauma, it causes that, discomfort over there. So as you start doing these things more and more, you'll find your system will get clearer and clearer and clearer. And the aches and pains ultimately will come down to a very large extent. And this is something that we've experienced with a lot of people, and I constantly say that the Monroe process is like a jhadu maroing process. It just jhadu maros and cleans your entire system so that it can come into equanimity, can be centered and more efficient. Let's put it that way. Okay. So whoever has done the excursion workshop, something that most people say, we are calmer, we are more present, we are more intuitive, we are more centered, we get annoyed less, we are sleeping better. So all those facts, what does it imply? That the stuff which we are carrying unnecessarily in our system is getting eradicated.
Question: can you get back into the wrong physical body by mistake? Can implies the ability for such incident to take place. It can happen as it did to me in the early days. How often is another matter. In our current civilization, there are no means to understand this possibility, even on a speculative basis. It has never happened to our laboratory subjects or those who have trained with us. We use a simple homing device to ensure return to your physical body. To return neatly and in a hurry, all you need to do is to think of one part of your physical body, such as a big right toe, and attempt to move or wriggle it. This brings prompt results. Because there is no data and the wrong body incident has occurred to me, it does presume the possibility that it might happen with an untrained novice. If that is your possibility, remember the wriggled big toe signal. It will save much fear and worry.
Okay. So now, in Robert Monroe's first book, The Journeys Out of the Body, he spoke of locales, locale 1, locale 2, locale 3. And some of the incidences that he actually narrates in the book is that he used to find himself in one of the locales in a body. And he was experiencing that experience of living in that locale, in that particular physical body. And he had awareness that it was not his physical body. Now, that those were the early days. Now, as I said, that nowadays when we are doing the process and the programming, there is a very beautiful structure which has been put into the preparatory process, into the affirmation, which actually creates a huge safeguard for these kind of things to happen. And again, in my experience, we've conducted over 100 workshops, and I have so many friends who have conducted a lot of workshops, and I have not had even one person tell me that this kind of a thing where they found themselves in someone else's body occur. Okay, so we must not feel scared. Whenever we are going into the process, if we are going into it with fear, then it's a big problem. And when you are operating out of fear, when we are going into these expanded states, which are thought responsive states of consciousness and universes, whatever we are thinking will start to manifest. So if we are thinking hell, that I'm going to be burnt in or I'm going to be fried in a pan of oil, then that is what will manifest for you. So one thing is very clear: we must drop fear whenever we are going into these explorations. Number two, in all the workshops, the first thing that you learn is one of the encodings is to come back to C1 consciousness. What is C1 consciousness? Most of you have done the excursion. Those of you who have not, I highly recommend that you do the excursion workshop. To come back to C1, you get an encoding. And one of the processes in that encoding is to wriggle your fingers and your toes. Now, in my own experience, my personal experience, again, I've shared this previously many times. I used to go into these altered states. I used to get I used to become literally comatose, stuck. And Shimangla, many times when she turned me, I used to be stuck like that. I couldn't move my hands and feet. Okay. Once she turned me and I literally fell off the bed. But mentally, I had full awareness. So I was totally aware of what she was doing. And in those states of consciousness, I was aware of what was happening. It took me 5 years of trial and error to come to this point, what he's saying over here, wriggle your toe or wriggle some part of your body. So if you start wriggling your hands and your fingers and your toes, immediately you will come back into the body and come out of that state of consciousness. That's a very simple way of doing it. Okay, so I don't think that unless you set an intent, I want to occupy that other body, that this is going to happen. And he says over here, we use a simple homing device, right? Of wriggling your fingers and toes. Also, now when we are going into the advanced programs, there is a concept of an ID. All of us have a unique ID, and we can home into our physical body or home into that consciousness by just that homing device. So if in the Lifeline program, those of you have done it over here, we actually go and locate people in those expanded states just by using a name which acts as an ID for that particular personality. Okay, so I don't think this is something that we need to worry about.
Question: what about animals in the OOB state? Have you met any? Could you communicate with them? The only ones recognizable to me have been domestic cats, which have been a part of our household family. They evidently have at least a second body, too, which can be perceived if they are asleep when you are out of body and you go to investigate. Of recent interest to me during the departure phase, I encountered three cats just outside, sitting relaxed and observant. In greeting them, I was surprised to find they were the three of our favorite cats who had died physically during the past 3 years. In retrospect, why I was surprised, I don't know.
So yes, you can encounter animals in these out of body states of consciousness. Many times a pet has died, the pet spirit is still with the owner. They will still hang around. Okay. In shamanism, power animals or power friends, as I call them, are always around, right? So they're also spirits of animals. So this is something that you can definitely encounter, in my view.
Question: will your sounds on your audio cassettes or those on any other sound cassette induce the OOB state? It would be very rare, if at all. Certain other factors must be approached, such as the fear barrier, reappraisal of belief systems, among others. It is the extreme exception that balance has been reached sufficiently to move that easily into the OOB state.
So, so fear is one of the biggest hindrances to being able to achieve the OOB state. Okay. And also your belief systems. If you truly believe that, no, I can't get out of the body, you're not getting out of the body. It's not possible. So you have to transcend your belief systems as well as your fear. Now, just any regular cassette or player is not going to put you into that stable field, which can actually induce the out of body experience. Having said that, the tracks which are there, which are specifically helpful in inducing these states, are definitely available.
Question: what about flying dreams? Is this an OOBE? We generally recognize that the flying dream, with or without an aircraft, is a rationalization of an OOBE, which is unacceptable to the belief system of the conscious mind. Later data suggests that the dream of getting out of your car and performing some act falls into a similar category. Have you ever dreamed that you forgot where you parked your car? Also, the falling dream often becomes re entry into the physical when practiced in slow motion.
Yes. So Robert Monroe mentions this many times in Journeys Out of the Body. He was an avid flyer, and he used to fly these glide aircrafts, okay, gliders. So many times he felt as if he is gliding, which helped him in getting out of the body. So stepping out of a vehicle, stepping through a door, going through a staircase, going through a tunnel, feeling that you're flying in an aircraft. Okay. All these things can indicate that you are having an out of body experience.
How is remote viewing different from an OOBE? Remote viewing, or the ability to see events taking place at another physical location, employs a trained state of consciousness that is effective while still very much within the physical body. Usually, only one form of perception is utilized, which translates as visual. In the OOB state, there is no awareness of the physical because you are away from it. Also, perceptions other than visual are invariably present. There are other differences, but these are the basics.
So when you are doing a remote viewing, you're very, very consciously aware of your physical body. But in the OOB state, you are not at all, or you are disconnected from the physical body. So in the RV state, in the remote viewing state, you generally will not view your own body. You will be viewing something else. You will have a target that I'm going to view this, right? And you're going to get perceptions for that. Now he says over here, generally in remote viewing, other senses are not present. But we know for a matter of fact from whatever data that Joe McMonaghan has given us, that other senses are also available in a remote viewing state of consciousness also. So we are in a spectrum of consciousness. Like in the gateway, in the excursion, etc., we show you that how much of your mind or how much of your conscious awareness is connected with physical matter reality. When we are talking like this, it's literally like 100%. When a person is daydreaming, it's slightly off. When a person goes into a meditative state, it's slightly off. When you're going into sleep, it's another state. When you're going into an OB, it's a different state, right? So there's disconnection which is taking place. But in a remote viewing, there is a lot of awareness associated with the body, right? So you're maybe so much off. In an OB, you're like so much off.
Question: can an OOBE be induced by hypnosis? There are a number of reports that this has taken place and it may be possible. We have no direct experience with it. The weakness of this technique from our perspective lies in the fact that the OOB individual is not in control of the activity, which seems to be quite important in the process.
So so it can happen. A person may be hypnotized, but when an OOB happens, right, you get out and you are there. But in hypnosis, it can be induced. So there are similarities, but generally, it's a question mark away.
When you find yourself OOB still performing a physical act such as driving a car, what should you do? How do you control it? Get back as fast as you can. Use the quick return method described earlier. This has not happened to me personally, but I understand it does occur infrequently.
So now you're driving a car and suddenly you find yourself out of body. You better come back, otherwise, you're going to have an accident. Having said that, there are various people who actually say that we were not even aware that I was driving my car from point A to point B, and I was not even aware that I was driving. So sometimes autonomous functions take over, right? Having said that, this is not a thing that we want. That's why in all the CDs, all the tracks which are there, there is a disclaimer: please do not drive after hearing these tracks. Okay. So you have to be cautious about it. Definitely.
Question: is it easier to go to a place or a person while in OOB? Usually to a person, easiest is to someone who is close to you emotionally. There are some who can go to places, but it requires a specific address or ident.
So you have to set an intent, right? You have to have an address. Like Robert Monroe in this book, he had an ident of the inspec, so he could go to them. He had an ident of BB, so he could go to find where BB was. If you do not have an address or an ident, you cannot go to that specific person. Now, if you are emotionally connected with a person, automatically there is a resonance between you and that other person. So definitely it becomes easier to go to that person.
Question: if you meet a being while OOB, how can you tell if it is malevolent or benevolent? An unqualified reply to this one is difficult. Often what is perceived as vicious or evil is simply a very good impersonal energy you have encountered, which you interpret as aimed at you personally. A sudden undertow at the beach may seem frightening and deadly, and it is your fear and the unknown potential of it that makes it so. The undertow itself doesn't know you exist and cares less. These can be avoided if you consciously limit your input frequency, as it were, allowing only those on your wavelength to communicate and or make contact with you. At best, if there is a question, pat it on the shoulder and tell it to go home. At worst, you go back to the physical and regroup. Otherwise, say hello and enter into some form of communication.
So in my experience, nothing is good and nothing is bad. It is only a perspective. What may be a very good person from someone's perspective may be a very bad person from another person's perspective. So if we shift our perspective, everything can become good. Okay. Now, very clearly, he says, as I mentioned previously, the preparatory process puts a very powerful structure for us to encounter only that is beneficial and constructive to us. Another thing, what are you going to experience? Like we ask this question of people when they are entering, when they come for the excursion workshop, and physical, we say, okay, you entered this room. What did you notice? Right now, 9 out of 10 times, the thing that you will notice is what you are interested in. Right. So whatever you are resonating with, that is what you will notice. This is the same thing that we encountered when we did zero limits, and then after that we did dark side of the light chasers, the other book that we did in our book reading. From dark side of the light chasers, it came out very, very effectively that only that you will only notice that which you resonate with. If you don't resonate with something, you are not going to notice it. So if you are having a problem, then you need to understand there's a resonance of that problem in your field. So what does Hoponopono or the premise of zero limit say? That you need to clean your field. If you clean your field, then whatever that other situation is, it automatically gets affected because there's a resonance between your field and that particular happening. So you're not going to heal that thing. You're going to heal your awareness in your field, and it affects the other situation. So in Zero Limits, the story goes that Dr. Hugh did not even visit that prison. He just took the files of all the prisoners and he cleaned whatever was occurring in his field vis-a-vis that particular prisoner. and it totally harmonized the prison. So he did not heal the prisoner, he healed himself. So now what is the caveat over here? That whatever is happening to us, we are responsible for. So if we can heal ourselves, we heal the entire process. Okay. So over here also, if you're going to encounter some malevolent being or energy or field, it is what you are resonating, which is creating that field. So if you can shift your perspective about it, the whole perspective will automatically shift. And this is something that I've experienced personally. Previously, when we used to go for Vastu rectification, we used to go in a fighting mood with the entities or whoever was there. I have realized from hard experience that everyone is good, everyone is wanting something. If you start a communication with them and just ask them, what do you want, and give them what they want, the matter is sorted out. So over here he clearly says, at the best, if there is a question, pat the guy on the shoulder and tell it to go home, or at worst you come back. Okay. Or say hello and start some form of communication. I found that starting communication works beautifully in all these situations.
Question: can one go forward and backward in time while OOB? Very much so, because the true OOB is not a time space state or condition. It is not as productive as one would imagine for several complex reasons. Most important is to use a strong home ident to get back in your original start point. Such ident must include not only place but time. Practice near time runs before tackling the long ones.
So we live in a 3D environment. Okay. But when we are going into expanded states, we are stepping out of the time space continuum. And because we are stepping out of the time space continuum, we can go forward and back in time at will. But setting an ident as to where we are going, number one, what are we wanting to experience, and also having an, today we are in this physical world for a particular reason. We are here to learn certain things. Now, if I can't find my way back, then there's a big problem. So you have to have a proper ident. You have to fix in your mind that this is a time space continuum that we are going to visit and coming back. It's like the Back to the Future movies. You can understand how, if you see all the movies, you'll find that how complicated the entire thing becomes. It's not funny. I would suggest, all of you watch. I think there are 4 or 5 of those Back to the Future movies. If you watch all of them, you will find that there is one timeline going like this. There's another timeline going like this. He goes from this timeline to this future line. He does something here. It shifts the timeline to the other timeline. And it's fascinating. But it's worth watching those movies to understand this concept, right? So setting an ident, setting a proper system in your out of body experiences becomes very, very important.
Question: what is my form while OOB? Think of your second or immediate non physical body as much like gelatin that has been removed from a mold. It remembers the human form and thus is near identical. The longer one is separated from the physical, the weaker the memory becomes unless reinforced. Time distance also seems to be a factor. The further away from the physical such memory or its effectiveness becomes less. If left to its own devices, you may become a ball, a teardrop, a small cloud, or just a blob. All of this can be bypassed by slipping out of the second body immediately after separation and becoming clear, undiluted energy. You can always grow a hand and arm if you need one.
So we are actually light. At the end of the day, we are all light. So, but we have taken this physical form, and this is the form that we identify with. So when we are going into these thought responsive universes, because we identify with this physical form, generally when you go out, you will find yourself in this form. But the more you go out, the more aware and more comfortable you become with that particular experience. You start literally becoming a light. So over here he says you can, like a teardrop, a ball, a small cloud, or just a blob, right? But most of the time when people go out and they're regularly going, they just find themselves as a field or just a light which is there.
Question: what about the reincarnation process? Are physical lifetimes sequential, simultaneous, or what? First, they are not sequential in time, they may be indeed be simultaneous. It is a question of who is doing the perceiving.
So now this is very, very important. Okay. All your lives, जो बोलते हैं ना past life regression, everything is happening at the same time. Where you focus your attention, there is where you will be. Very straight and very simple, right? This was very well indicated in that movie. I keep repeating it, in the movie Interstellar, where the crux of the movie is he's in that shaft and all events are taking place at the same time. Now, wherever he pays attention to, that is the scene which is manifesting in his conscious awareness. So the idea here is that you are existing in all time simultaneously. So there is no past and there is no future. Everything is, and everything is happening now. Because what do we have in our hand really? We read the power of now, right? Everything is happening right now. There's nothing happening before and after. So this is what he clearly says over here. First, they are not sequential in time. They may indeed be simultaneous. It is a question of who is doing the perceiving. So who is perceiving? And from where or what state of consciousness are they perceiving? That is what creates time and space.
Question: why would super beings as you describe need technology? They don't. Putting their activities and ability within this context appears to be one possible way for our left brained culture to begin to understand what they are doing. Such technology is as natural to them as our autonomic system is to us. We don't think about our gastrointestinal tract, our circulation system, or our lungs as technology. We just use them without conscious effort. Although we now understand much of the technology involved, their technology is much the same, relatively, except that they deliberately apply it and control it.
So there are entities, there are consciousnesses, or they are beings who are more highly evolved than us, right? Today, there's a distinction between a monkey and us. So there's an evolution. There's a distinction between the animal or a cow and us. So that distinction is because of evolution. Now, we don't think of most of the things that we do. Like, for example, when we were growing up, using a remote was a real task. We had to really learn how to do it. Now today, babies who are coming are, or I mean, a 2-year-old can switch channels for you, right? So where is that? The evolution is taking place. For us, the remote was something which was out, right? Or for example, the mobile phone. When we start using the mobile phone, we had to learn how to use it. Today, I see all the time that even 2-year-olds are using mobile phones. They know how to change the app. They know which app to go to. They can see a video themselves. So what is happening? The mobile is becoming a part of the hand. I don't agree with it, but it is becoming. Again, the TV channel. They know which channel is which. A 2-year-old will know the cartoon channel, for example, right? How do they know that? We could not have even guessed it at when we were small. But evolution is there. So as we are evolving, naturally things start becoming very natural to us.
Question: is our human technology a result of communication with such super beings? There is much to support this premise, especially when key figures and events in human history are objectively studied with this prospect as an alternative to our present belief system.
So this is something that I have actually encountered. When we are going into Focus 27, we find there is a planning center. Things are happening. Things are invented over there, and that message is coming or put into the brain of various people all over the globe. That is why you find that many people start working on the same invention in different parts of the world at the same time, but they have no communication with each other. They don't even know that they are working on the same thing. How is it at the same time things are happening? So there is some kind of a download taking place which is making it happen. Now, where does that happen? From a higher state of consciousness. Over here in this book, he talked about the rings, right? People who are coming in from the outer rings definitely are putting certain things into the inner rings and into the earth plane existence for our well-being and for our betterment and advancement.
Question: do certain types of food, coffee, smoking, sugar, etc., aid or inhibit OOBs? There is no direct correlation either way, based solely upon those laboratory subjects and program participants active with the Institute. We are not aware of any reliable in-depth studies on the matter. Moderation may be the common factor, if any.
So at the institute, we are told you eat everything. In fact, in the workshops, etc., that we conduct, we actually tell people to keep snacks with them so that when they feel hungry, they can eat. Because what I am finding as a fact that with the Monroe system, you can go into these expanded states so fast that we need to hold you back. So that is one of the reasons why you need to eat, because food is grounding, it grounds you. Okay. In most other meditative practices, they tell you to eat light or be in a fast to be able to go into the expanded state. With the Monroe process, in my experience, it really doesn't matter. Okay. But yeah, having said that, what we have found over the period of time is that when you start using the process, things like alcohol, you will, in fact, there was one lady who attended the Resilience Advantage program, and she said that I can't drink anymore. There are many people who have come back to us and told us that after doing the program and using the process, it becomes difficult to digest non-vegetarian food. So when we look at it from our scriptures perspective, when we are doing these processes, we are going towards becoming more sattvic. So when we are becoming sattvic, our body needs cleaner food. It doesn't need the traumatized food so much, right? So that effect will definitely be there. In fact, I've started feeling in myself that, having grains is becoming a slight problem for me. So I was actually telling my mother and my aunt Shimangla that I'm going to start eating fruits for lunch also. We have only fruits in the morning for breakfast. And I was thinking of, even for lunch, I was thinking of shifting to fruits. So definitely when your body system starts getting clearer, the food that you eat will automatically shift. It is a natural process which happens.
Question: what would you say is the nature of good and evil? They exist only in the mind of the perceiver due to ignorance and lack of understanding, plus an immersed viewpoint.
So in my view, everything is good. This talk of hell and brimstone and you'll be judged and all that, in my view, it does not happen. We are here at our own will We are the ones who are going to evaluate our own performance and then decide what we are going to do next. Okay. Everything is good. It's only a perspective with which we are looking at something. It's basically a viewpoint.
Question: can one live two lives simultaneously relative to time? This question has been asked of our non physical friends who report that it is not only possible but does take place frequently. We have no further information about it, how or why it occurs, except that I personally was given the name and location of a second life I am living, but I have not had the time or the courage to verify it if possible.
So, what is he saying over here, right? We can have simultaneous lives. That means our conscious awareness can exist in two places at the same time. We've had, in when we were reading autobiography of a yogi, in that biolocation was seen, right? So this can occur. In my view, it can definitely occur, and there is no reason why this would not be occurring. Even in the fringe, basically there were two realities, and everyone who was in this reality was also in that reality. So why is that concept coming up? Because this is absolutely possible. We can exist. Anaga, we'll just come to you.
Question: have your religious beliefs changed as a result of your OOB activities? Yes.
So I think this is an emphatic yes, because most religions, they carry a dogma with them. Only Jesus will make you transcend. Only Muhammad will make you transcend, right? I think these things are very, very false. The shift, according to me, that takes place when you indulge in these going into these expanded states is that you shift from being religious to start becoming spiritual. And there's a very big difference between being religious and being spiritual. Okay, we can stop here. Naga, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Same lines. If there is a thief and he steals a lot, or there are murderers,
Yeah.
so we're saying nothing is good and bad. Everything is good. Then
Okay,
what
so
happens to
let
them?
us say the government of India wants to
Mhm.
get some information from, let us say, USA, right? And they
Mhm.
send in a person to gather that information and bring it back. And
Mhm.
for that, that guy has to go into someone's office and break a safe and get it. Now, what
Mhm.
happens? Is that good
It's
or
not
bad?
bad. Um,
What is
Good.
he doing?
He's
He's
doing
stealing,
something for his country.
but he's stealing, right?
Mm.
Yes or no?
Yes, he's stealing, but he's doing his job for his
So,
country,
what
right?
is the intent behind doing something? Now, let us say there is a family, my family is starving and there is no
Mhm.
food. And then that guy goes and attempts to take some food or, steal some food for his family. Now, what is the
Mhm.
intent? If the food is not there, or some medication for that matter.
It's good. It's good intent.
So, so nothing is good or bad. It is always a perspective. Have you got
Let's say
that?
there are, yeah, like there are these shoplifters. If they are people who are just taking it for their own good, or these the heist jobs that they do,
Yeah.
they just do it for their own good
Yeah.
because
So
they don't
then
want to
what's the
work hard.
intent? What are they
It's
feeding?
bad.
Yeah. So
Then
then,
it's bad.
exactly. So then it's a
so
perspective,
then
right?
so then what
Uh,
happens to them if everything is good?
No, no. Again,
Then
everything is good. It's only the perspective you look at it. I'm using a very crude example here. Okay. Now,
Mhm.
someone really badly wants to go to the toilet, and there is no toilet around, and they just find a wall and they go there. Now, is it good or bad?
good.
No. Her question is not that. You're seeing it from the good point of view. But what she's trying to say is that people do it with not a good intent.
So that's
Then
what I'm saying.
what happens?
It's a
When they
perspective.
want to spray paint the walls, for greed they want to do stuff to collect money. That is her question.
So this is what
Yes,
I'm
yes,
saying.
thank
It's
you.
a perspective. What is your intent behind doing what you're doing? That is what would see. It
The
is.
perspective is very clear. It's
Is it uplifting or is it depleting? Is it for the greater good? That is the question you need to ask.
Yeah, but then this comes from the premise of what she was asking,
Hmm.
is that there is nothing as how did this start? Good or bad or whatever, it's all a perspective. There is a good and there is a bad.
No,
The
it's your
intent-
perspective.
The intent, no. The intent has to be very clear of it. My perspective, maybe मेरे को ये करने तो मेरे लिए तो बहुत ही फायदेमंद होगा. But
अरे तो यही बात
but I
है.
may not be thinking for the greater good of the mankind.
Correct. So
Now,
then
if you
when
have to go to the loo, you have to go to the loo. That's a different thing totally. If you have to, when you're starving and you're stealing to feed your stomach, that's a
Yeah.
totally different thing,
Yeah.
But
exactly.
when you perform actions
Yeah.
with, ill-considerate,
Like a bank robbery.
Selfish.
Yeah, that is
Yeah,
the
like a-
premise. Now you answer that. That is her premise.
But
Yeah,
again, it is always a perspective.
But the bank robbery is a bad thing. so
Today,
it's
freedom fighters were there. Okay. Now, from the perspective of, let's say, the Indian freedom fighters. Now, from the perspective of the British, they were criminals. But from the perspective of the regular people, they were freedom fighters.
You're giving only good examples.
Arey
Yeah.
Baba, I'm saying.
What about the elections? What about all these rallies?
Yeah.
Isn't that selfishness?
Yeah, so they have an intent, right? Now, what is the intent which they are operating with? And then you have to consider what is the intent that you are operating with. Again,
What
a
if there's a
rally is
bank
good or
robbery?
is it bad? Who's going to decide that?
It's
Niket,
definitely bad.
What
If
if
a
there's
rally
a
is
bank